I'm really enjoying this movie. A silent voice. So the main character, his name is Shoya. In the beginning of this movie, we see him planning to commit suicide, basically because he feels guilty about his past. He feels like a burden to the world. The story hasn't explained why he feels this way, but it will soon. And Shoya is a very relatable character, especially for me. He's a character I can relate to on an emotional level, for many different reasons, as we will see. We get a little backstory of Shoya and the rest of the characters back when they were children. This character named Shoko, she's a new kid in school. The first thing you'll notice about Shoko is that she has a very kind and polite personality to her character. But she's also deaf, which comes as a shock to the rest of the classmates. They're fascinated with wanting to get to know her, and it starts out kind of friendly, but it quickly turns into bullying, as you will see. With her death condition, Shoko's not able to interact with the classmates as well as she would like to. Then Shoya, the main character of this movie, he starts mocking and making fun of Shoko because of her condition, which of course is a very crappy thing to do, right? And the classmates are shocked by this behavior from Shoya, but they quickly start adopting his childish and immature-like behavior because they think it will be fun.
That isn't funny. Sit down, Shoya.
The teacher doesn't think it's very funny, any of his antics whatsoever. As I'm watching this movie, I start to feel bad for Shoko because all she really wants is to make friends. And she's naturally curious as to what the other students are saying because again, she can't understand, she can't hear, right? Shoko doesn't even understand what hatred is at her age, which makes the story even more heartbreaking. Shoya tells Shoko that he and the rest of the classmates are starting to get very, very sick of having to cater to Shoko's condition. Of course, that's very unfair for her to have to deal with that, but again, what's heartbreaking about this scene is that she doesn't even understand that this is hatred, and all she wants is for them to be friends. And then Shoya responds by calling her a freak. That's only the beginning of the circus that is this bullying. There's this character named Nyoka. She's a very unlikable character, at least in my opinion, because all she does is complain about Shoko, and she's such an entitled, spoiled brat. You know, all you want is to see her get disciplined for her selfish behavior. The good news is that Shoko is eventually able to meet a good friend, one that sticks to her side despite the gossip and despite the drama around her, despite the bullying around her. And then Nyoka continues to talk crap about both of them 24/7 because that's all she's good for. But in a strange kind of way, I'm able to meet all of these characters halfway because as kids, we don't really know any better. And this story understands that perspective, that as kids, we're all immature in one way or another. Not saying bullying is justified per se, it's just when you're like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7, like we could say things without realizing how it affects other people. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video. Sometimes we're not even aware of what hatred can do for not only those around us, but for ourselves, how it can affect everyone, how it can affect our friends, how it can affect our classmates, how it can affect how we feel about ourselves. Because you never know what anyone's going through. You never know their medical conditions. You never know their mental state. You never know how they were treated as a child. You never know anything about these people, right? And all we could really ask for at the end of the day is a little bit of kindness, because it's the right thing to do, right? Not to get anything in return, but because it's the right thing to do. But as the story continues, Shoya continues to pick on Shoko 24/7. And it gets so bad to the point where she starts bleeding out of her ear. But what's heartbreaking is Shoko shows up once again to apologize to Shoya. She herself is apologizing because she doesn't know what else to say. She doesn't know what else to do. She doesn't know how to respond to how people are treating her. So the only thing she's left with is to apologize herself, because she's owed an apology. She deserves an apology from the way Shoya has been treating her, but she never gets that. But it is here in the story where Shoya starts to feel a little bit guilty, starting to contemplate the way he's been unfairly treating the new kid in school. Shoya finally gets exposed for his behavior, and the principal and the teacher make sure that he is punished for his actions. And then Shoya starts to blame his classmates. Really, they are all to blame, but the sad truth of the matter is that it did all start with Shoya's behavior. I wanted to pause right here at Shoko's notebook. You can take a look at the very disrespectful things that her classmates have been saying to her. The very rude behavior that she has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. She's not at the age to understand why the students are treating her this way, but obviously as we age in life, we start to look back at the way people used to treat us, and we start to have a better understanding of whether or not we were treated unfairly, if the behavior that we had to deal with was justified, and if there was any hatred involved. And as we can see here, there was clearly hatred involved. As I've said before, hatred doesn't just affect our friends, it doesn't just affect the people around us, it doesn't just affect ourselves, but it can also affect our family as well. And right here we can see Shoya's mother is very disappointed with the news that her very own child is bullying a student. Shoya's mother apologizes to Shoko's mother about her child's behavior, but the story makes it clear that part of the reason why Shoya has been so unfair to Shoko is because he doesn't really know how to talk to Shoko. You know, people have different way of responding to their emotions. Sometimes people don't know how to express their emotions, so the only thing they're able to do is to do it in a passive, kind of rude kind of way. And I don't know if anyone watching this has ever experienced something like that, but sometimes people don't know how to express their emotions, right? So they begin to treat us in ways that may come off as strange, out of the ordinary, and out of the blue. But really in their heart, they want to love, they're just not sure how to love, if that makes any sense. In this scene, Shoya and Shoko get into a literal fight. Like they literally scrap. And it's very heartbreaking because all Shoko was trying to do was to help Shoya. She only wants to be his friend, and it's devastating that she has to go through all this pain, all this trauma, just because she wanted to do a good thing at the end of the day. But it's after this fight sequence that she finally gives up and transfers to a different school. And again, it foreshadows Shoya's character development, and it tries to make an emphasis on the fact that he feels very, very guilty for his actions. This story makes a time jump from elementary school to high school. Shoya, by the grace of God, is able to get a second chance with Shoko to make things right, to fix his wrongs, and to finally show her that he's sorry for his past actions, for the way he treated her in elementary school. I said in a video once, some of us have regrets, opportunities that we wish we could have acted upon, but we didn't know any better, so what is there to regret? If anything, those experiences make us smarter. But it is clear that Shoya feels very guilty for the way he's treated Shoko in the past. He went out of his way to learn sign language. But it is here where we finally get to see Shoya's character finally blossom. Like I said, I can relate to Shoya's character quite well. Shoya is a character who likes to cringe at his past mistakes, and he's very self-conscious when it comes to trying to meet new people and people's opinions about him in general. He makes assumptions as to what people are saying about him. Another reoccurring theme in this movie is the topic of suicide. Suicide is mentioned a lot in this movie. At first, Shoya tries to commit suicide, but then he backs out, and his mother is left devastated by the idea of her very own child even thinking about the idea of committing suicide, and Shoko herself also attempts suicide, as we'll see later in this movie. Something I've realized about this movie is that trauma doesn't just happen when something devastating happens to us, like for example, like somebody gets hit by a car or you get bullied in kindergarten, for example. But trauma can also happen when we ourselves remember the wrong that we've done. And for lack of a better term, we can bring up cringe, right? Cringe is when we feel awkward, we feel ashamed about something we did. We wish we weren't that lame in whatever situation it was, right? When we cringe at the stuff we used to do, it's easy to feel ashamed about ourselves. It's really important that we remember that we all come from the same light at the end of the day. We all come from the same God, right? The God who loves us dearly. Shoya believes in God. He's a firm believer in God, and God gave him the strength to continue on with this life and to save Shoko's life as well.
Can we be friends? The world's biggest loser.
Is there anybody watching this that can relate to what Shoya just said about himself? That he's the world's biggest loser just because he asked a girl if they could be friends. What's so embarrassing about that? What's so cringe about that, right? I know that this is the kind of overthinking mentality that I can relate to, because as I'm watching this movie, I'm relating to how Shoya feels about himself, how he cringes at his past awkward situations as he continues to evolve as a character, thinking how can he be a less awkward person and a more socially acceptable individual. But I don't know about you, I'd rather be weird than be normal. So karma is a thing in this movie where, because Shoya bullied Shoko in the past, he himself starts to get bullied in similar ways to how he used to bully Shoko. And you know, like I said, hatred doesn't help anybody, right? So even though Shoya low-key deserves to be punished for his wrongdoing, in the end, hatred still affects not only him, but everyone around him, his family, his friends, and even the girl he used to pick on, because all she wants is peace, for him to be happy, which is a very interesting way of thinking about it, isn't it? So in this sequence in the story, Shoya starts to block out all the love around him, block out all the noise around him, and he starts to assume in his head that everyone is talking about him, that nobody likes him, that everyone wants nothing to do with him, which of course is all in his head, obviously. That's how guilty he feels about how he used to treat this one girl in the past. He feels so bad about it. How many people watching this video has had a friend in the past who has backstabbed them and has betrayed him in some kind of traumatic way? That's how Shoya feels about this one guy. He used to be friends with this character called Kazuki, and Kazuki starts to spread rumors around the school about how he used to treat Shoko, only making things even more harder for him to forgive not only himself, but to make things right with her. Here's a very interesting scene in A Silent Voice. Shoya notices this one kid sitting right beside him. Instead of talking to him, he starts to assume in his head, it doesn't matter whether or not I talk to this guy. Like, he starts to contemplate whether or not he should say something or if he should just not say anything at all and don't even bother him whatsoever, right? But as you'll see, this guy sitting right beside him ends up becoming his best friend. And how many times in our own personal lives have somebody sat next to us minding their own business and we don't say anything to them? We don't think anything of it. My point is that you never really know who you'll get along with. You never really know who you'll have a connection with. And you never really know where a friendship could go. You never really know who's sitting beside you, what their history is, what their personality is like, and what their potential is. You never really know until you say something. Shoya kind of reminds me of Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown had this personality as well. Instead of actually committing action and just saying hi, right? He would contemplate in his head a million different scenarios as to how it's not okay for him to do a good thing in the end, right? When really it's all in his head. And like I said, I can totally relate to that kind of personality. So Shoya finally says something to this one guy who he's curious about. In a very, very cool kind of way, he helps this guy from getting picked on. In a way, he ends up being a hero in that sense. A beautiful friendship is born based on this one action. Another thing I can relate to about Shoya as a character is that when we spend a lot of alone time with ourselves, that's when the devil can fill our minds with a bunch of lies and a bunch of intrusive thoughts that don't do us any favors in the end. Like, here's a sign that, you know, I'll never do this, or here's a sign I'll never find love, or here's a sign that this person hates me, or, you know, of course this isn't gonna go well because of this reason, or why should I even bother because this is likely what's going to happen, stuff like that. Those are the kind of thoughts that can develop when we spend a lot of time just trying to figure out how life is instead of actually going out and experiencing life for ourselves. Growing a connection with God is a good way of getting our minds right. So I've talked about how hatred affects us in a negative way. Now I want to talk about how kindness can make an impact in our lives as well. Just simple acts of kindness, right? Remember this guy sitting on the bench next to Shoya. He shows Shoya great kindness, and Shoya finally starts to open his heart to him and realizes that this guy just wants to be his friend. He just wants to get to know him as a person. They start to hang out with each other. They begin to do everything together. They go to the movies, they go get lunch, they help each other in school. In a very heartbreaking kind of way, Shoya's never really had a friend in his life. And he asks this guy, what does it mean to become someone's friend? Everyone's got their own definition of what being a friend is like and what being a friend is all about. But we all have an idea. I believe everyone can have a friend. In my own personal experience, simply asking God for a friend, you know, praying about it, that can open up the door for a lot of opportunities. And then give it a try, you know, you never know who you may come across. You'll be surprised with the amount of opportunities that you get to experience.
Shoko's my girlfriend, okay?
Oh, well, that sucks. Not for me personally, because I brought her all this bread.
I love how this movie turns an unlikable character to a very relatable character, a very charming, a very loving character. And that's what Shoya is to me, because right here where he's talking about how he wants to see Shoko just so he can hang out with her and share his bread with her, he's awkwardly fumbling around his words and he drops the bread on the floor. It's a very awkward situation for him. Another point I want to bring up is that people can change. People can change. We have to all be open-minded to the idea that people can change. This is not always the case, but just like in this movie, it's clear Shoya has changed, and all he wants to do is to make things right. And Shoko's sister isn't giving him an opportunity to make that change. She's not giving him the benefit of the doubt. You know, even that, you know, is a form of hatred. To not be able to give someone a chance just because of how they once were in the past. And I'm not saying don't be cautious around certain individuals. I'm just saying not everyone is out to do harm, and we've all made mistakes in the past, and all we could ask for is a second chance and to treat others the way you want to be treated, as cliche as that sounds. As the story continues, Shoya is able to develop his relationship with Shoko on a deep level. Even when Shoya starts to really develop this friendship with Shoko, Shoko's sister still has a hard time giving Shoya the benefit of the doubt because she believes that Shoya is only doing it to feel better about himself, or he has an act going on, some kind of, it's all fake, you know, that kind of assumption. And she has to learn throughout this movie that Shoya's behavior is genuine and authentic, and he's not trying to wrong Shoko in any more ways that he's already has, that he only wants to make things right. Shoko's sister posts a humiliating picture of Shoya for the whole school to see, and it really embarrasses him, but he's able to forgive her very easily for some reason. I don't know how. Maybe he feels like Shoko's family deserves all the kindness they can get. No, and I don't blame him for thinking that way. And as we'll see, even though he's been wronged by Shoko's sister, he shows her great kindness and invites her into his home. For dinner time, he offers her an umbrella and he vows to make things right, most importantly. Even though her mother, Shoko's mother, still hates Shoya with all her guts. He knows he's caused people so much pain for his behavior in elementary school. But he just definitely, if anything, he doesn't want to cause Shoko any more pain that he already has.
Oh, the prodigal son returns. How are you doing this fine day? You come back for a rematch?
Just returning the umbrella I borrowed.
Shoya is able to track down Shoko's former friend, the one who stuck by her side even though she was getting bullied 24/7. Shoko greatly appreciates Shoya's kindness and determination to make things right between him and her, and she herself starts to develop feelings for Shoya. Shoya wants nothing to do with Nyoka because he can sense that she hasn't changed one bit. Her character hasn't changed. She's still a bully. She hasn't learned from her mistakes. She doesn't regret her wrongdoing. Even though she may have a fondness for Shoya for whatever reason, she misses the fun she used to have picking on Shoko. When I say Nyoka is an unlikable character, this is only the beginning of how bad it gets with her. I think this part of the movie is pretty interesting where Shoko wakes up feeling different. She feels more loving. She feels more confident about herself. She wears her hair differently. And as she's talking with Shoya, she starts to talk to him in her own voice. She tries to communicate with him in a different kind of way. As you remember from the choir scene in this movie, her voice is not that it's bad, it's just very difficult to understand. And Shoya encourages her to continue using sign language instead. And this kind of hurts Shoko's confidence, maybe due to the fact that she's trying to impress Shoya. But the message I'm trying to convey here is when you're talking to somebody you have feelings for, instead of trying to be somebody you're not, to express the best part about yourself. Express the best part about you, whatever that may be, and not to change yourself too much to the point where you're only trying to change to impress the one you're interested in. It's good to change, but that change has to be authentic. It can't be forced in this kind of way, if that makes sense. So Shoko gives Shoya a gift, and then she confesses her feelings to him. She says, when she's saying this, she's very embarrassed. She's very nervous about saying this. It's not an easy thing to say. I actually had an experience once. One girl from middle school said it to me and I didn't know what to say. Kind of feel like Shoya in this scene right here where I'm just not sure what to respond with. But the only difference here is that Shoya doesn't even understand what she's trying to say, and he completely ignores her because he thought she was saying something completely different, which is really, really funny. But, you know, what's something we can take from this? That Shoya, if he did understand what she was trying to say, he would feel the same way. Therefore, protect your heart, sure, but just, if you're gonna confess your feelings, you know, you never know. You never know how the other person feels. It's better to shoot your shot. They say you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I always feel like it's better to take your shot than to live with the regret of not knowing what the outcome would have been.
Where are you going?
Another point I want to bring up is that Shoya, throughout this movie, he's always looking for signs, whether or not Shoko feels the same way about him that he feels about her. I feel like it's good to look for signs. It's just the problem with this is that it can get to our head to the point where it becomes a distraction. And instead of living in the truth, we create this character, we create this fantasy of what is not actually real. And it's really easy to live in fantasy land rather than to find out the truth for ourselves. And there's this one scene in this movie where Shoko's sister says to Shoya, if you really want to know how somebody feels about you, all you really have to do is ask. As human beings, we overcomplicate this. I think that's so true. And you can finally find whether or not you're meant to be with whatever person you're always fantasizing about, or if it's best to move on and try to find somebody else. Shoya begins to open his heart around his friends and his classmates, and they spend some great time bonding with each other at this amusement park. He even starts to bond with Nyoka, the really annoying, unlikable character, but she finds a way to screw it up. I say Nyoka is an unlikable character, but really, like, she also has some psychology surrounding her behavior. So all she wants is for things to go back to the way things used to be. And how can you really blame her for that? She had so much fun picking on Shoko in elementary school, and she had fun bonding with Shoya during that time, and she wishes everything would go back to the way things were. Shoya obviously wants something a little different, and he wants a new future for himself. He doesn't want to be reminded of his past, but Nyoka continues to bring his past back up to him, and obviously you can see how this creates conflict between the two characters.
You know, if Shoko hadn't shown up, we would all still be friends and be happy. Tell me the truth. Do you hate me?
Probably.
This is as bad as it gets with Nyoka. This scene right here where she invites Shoko to spend some time on a Ferris wheel together. You would think like, oh, they're just doing it to bond with each other, but Nyoka uses this as an opportunity to completely go off on Shoko and bring up all her hardcore feelings about her as a person, that she absolutely hates her. She wants nothing to do with her. What's very sad is that all Shoko can respond with is, I'm sorry. Just like in elementary school, all she could respond with is, I'm sorry. And it's devastating. It's devastating not only for her, but for her sister, for Shoya, for her family. And like I said, hatred spreads. Hatred doesn't just affect us, but it affects the people around us. It affects everyone. And it points Shoko to the brink of suicide. She even physically assaults her, dude. She physically puts her hands on her, dude. And her problem is that she's only thinking about herself in this situation. She's not trying to see it from Shoko's perspective. She's not trying to understand how difficult things are with her health condition. She just expects her to be born quote unquote normal like everyone else. Do I even have to explain how unfair that is? Get this, so Nyoka says in this meeting, she says, I hate you, and I know that you probably hate me too, right? But Shoko responds with, no, I don't hate you, obviously, right? Why would she, right? And then Shoko responds with, I hate myself. She responds with, I hate myself. And for whatever reason, for God knows why, Nyoka thinks it's justified to slap Shoko in the face due to this response. I have no idea why she jumps to that conclusion, but this is the kind of hatred I'm talking about that doesn't do anyone any favors whatsoever. So this one character named Miki, this girl, she got the biggest mouth, bro. She exposes Shoya to the entire class that he used to pick on Shoko. You know, I don't know if anybody's ever met somebody like this, but she completely embarrasses Shoya. Like I said, he obviously feels bad about what he's done in the past, and all he wants is a new, fresh start to his life, where he's not reminded of his wrongdoing and he's not reminded of how much of a jerk he once was. She just completely ruins that optimistic dream of his in like 5 minutes. It's really devastating for this character. Shoko's sister has a dream about her sister killing herself. Of course, this is very alarming to her. She doesn't think anything of it, but nobody wants to ignore stuff like this. At this part of the movie, Shoya's already developed a bond with Shoko and with Yuzuru, Shoko's sister. But the one person he hasn't developed a bond with is their mother, for obvious reasons. So here, Shoya helps Shoko develop this birthday cake for her mother, for her 44th birthday. And Shoko's mother shows up, and she begins to have that, bro, if you don't get out of here in the next 10 seconds, look on her face.
Why is he here? What is that boy doing in our kitchen?
And she demands for an explanation as to why he's there in the first place, because obviously she wants nothing to do with him.
Don't be like that. It's a party. We're supposed to be celebrating.
So Yuzuru encourages her mother to lighten up and to accept Shoya for who he is at this point in time, not for what he's done in the past. But here's a very dark realization I'm having right now that, we pause right here where they're all sitting at the dinner table, forming a decent bond with each other, right? And none of them realize Shoko's mother, Yuzuru, and Shoya, they're all unaware of the fact that Shoko wants to kill herself, that she's about to do the unthinkable within the next couple of hours. They're completely unaware. Moments like this, they exist in this life, right? Where we're unaware of how the person we're sitting next to actually feels, like what they're actually planning on doing, how they feel about their existence. And that's why it's always important to be kind. You never really know what anyone's going through, even though somebody may look like they're in a good mood, even though somebody may look like everything's okay, even though somebody may look like nothing's wrong. That person could be going through so much suffering. You would never know because society encourages us to always put a smile on our face, to always force this false perception of who we actually are so that we may be accepted in our community. Could that be part of the reason why Shoko feels the way that she does? So in the fireworks scene, Shoko says her final goodbye to Shoya. Shoya at this point, he's not realizing what Shoko is about to do. He thinks that Shoko is just going to study for some school assignment or something. But she secretly has these dark thoughts in her mind about who she is as a person and about what she's about to do within the next couple of minutes. Shoya follows Shoko because he is told by Shoko's sister that he needs to get a camera. But to his shock, he notices Shoko climbing on the balcony, about to do the unimaginable. And he runs as fast as he can to grab her. And he just prays to God that God would give him the strength to save Shoko. He starts to contemplate how he used to unfairly treat her, how he used to unfairly pick on her, how he used to treat her in the past has created a butterfly effect that has led to this moment right here. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the full extent of what hatred can do to a human being. It can lead to this. He prays, he says, God, if you save her, I promise to look people in the eye, I promise to open my heart, that he'll be better in general.
Starting tomorrow, I'll listen when people speak to me.
And here's a very devastating realization he has in this moment where he not only notices the scar that he gave her all those years ago, but he also starts to ask himself, what does this person really think about me? Because he still hasn't found the answer to that question. He has no idea how Shoko really feels about him. That's the unfortunate part about death sometimes, that we're not able to get all the answers we're looking for. Let's say Shoko's attempt was successful. Shoya would have never been able to know that Shoko had feelings for him. He would have never known that. He would have always assumed probably the worst case scenario. And that's why it's important to treat people kind now while we still see them. That way we're not thinking about what if I would have did this or what if I would have did that, and the least we can do is to be loving in the moment that we have with each other right now. And that's what I got in this scene right here. How important it is to love one another like how Jesus loves. So Shoya falls in the water, but he is able to save Shoko's life. So it's a bittersweet victory. Shoya's able to survive the fall, and in the hospital, Shoko's family apologized to Shoya's mother for what could have been. How devastated they feel. Shoko would go to that extent to end her life in that kind of way, that they wish it never happened to begin with, and Shoya would have never gotten hurt. They completely forgive Shoya in this moment because they realize the transformation that he's had. It's not something to take for granted. Shoko's mother finally realizes that truth in this moment, and we can see right here she's apologizing for not treating Shoya with the respect that he deserves. This is a beautiful connection that they have, that Shoko's mother is just glad that Shoya's okay, and Shoya's mother is just glad that Shoko's okay. But this connection right here just makes you dislike Nyoka even more as a character. Nyoka is flat out bullying Shoko after her suicide attempt. In her defense, maybe, it's likely due to the fact that she really likes Shoya. However, that doesn't justify this scene right here where she's flat out wrestling Shoko and giving her even more bruises than she already has. So then Shoko's mother gives her a taste of her own medicine and decides to pick a fight with this kid who really could use a good whooping. After all this went down, Shoko once again has nothing left to say other than I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I am so sorry, and she cries as hard as she can to Shoya's mother, saying that all of this is her fault. And you just feel for the poor girl in this moment. If it isn't already clear by now, suicide isn't a joke. This is a very serious topic. And right here, Shoko's mother and her sister, they start to think about what they could have done differently to prevent this suicide attempt from happening. It leaves the both of them with a lot of dark emotions. What a love story this is, that Shoko feels like this is all her fault, while Shoya feels this is all his fault. It's almost like the two of them were meant to be. Very similar to what Shoya did with Shoko's family. Shoko tries to make things right with everyone she knows because everything has gone downhill ever since Shoya badly injured himself due to her suicide attempt, right?
We were all so worried about you.
And all the characters, except for Nyoka, not surprising, treats her with more kindness than she was expecting. And it is here, ladies and gentlemen, where we really get to see the power of kindness, the power of love. Love destroys hatred. Love is the answer. Here's an amazing quote in this movie. Shoya tells Shoko, even though certain things may make life difficult sometimes, it's not worth dying over, whatever it is. He says this because he himself wanted to commit suicide. It's not just her, they both had that thought for different reasons. Shoya wanted to do it out of guilt and regret, and Shoko wanted to do it because she felt like a burden to the world. Both of these reasons can be solved with a little bit of love. You give Shoya a little bit more love, and he can find peace in his life. You give Shoko a little bit more love, and she can find peace in her life. So what I'm getting at is that whether we realize it or not, we can have an impact on people who feel this way about themselves. And we can change the way they perceive themselves and how they perceive the world around them. Just with a little bit of kindness. With a little bit of kindness, with a little bit of love, with a little bit of understanding, we can make people excited again to live. That is the power of love. Shoya asks Shoko to teach him how to live because he feels like he's been doing it wrong until this point. And he once again cringes at his suggestion, if you will, in a very likable, relatable way. Nyoka is able to meet up again with Shoya and reveal a little bit more information about herself, that she admits that she sucks at life sometimes. However, she just can't see herself to like Shoko for whatever reason. But it is also revealed in this story that she was with him in the hospital by his side throughout the whole time he was unconscious. Here's what's very interesting is that even characters like this, even though we may not understand them, they have a loving side to their character that they just may not know how to express their affection. As I mentioned previously, Nyoka and Shoya, they have a little moment right here, and Shoya's able to open his heart a little bit more to her, despite all the drama she's caused till this moment. As the story is about to conclude, Shoya continues to block all the love around him at his school and just feels kind of awkward around everybody. He doesn't want to really talk to anyone. He doesn't want to look people in the eye. He doesn't want to see where new friendships can go. He still has this guilt feeling within him that he still feels subconscious everywhere he goes, likely due to the way he was treated in the past. But you know, the power of love can fix this feeling, as I've mentioned before. All of his friends, they show him great kindness, they apologize, they give him gifts, they truly try and get him to realize how much they appreciate him for who he is and what he's done. As he invites his friends to hang out one more time, his heart begins to open up completely, and he finally realizes that nobody hates him, nobody's out to get him, nobody has harsh feelings towards him, that it's all love and it can only go up from here. Shoya bawls his eyes out with emotions that cannot be explained. He feels at peace with who he is as a person. He feels at peace with where his life is in this moment, and he's just so grateful to God that everything has worked out the way he could have never imagined. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is A Silent Voice.
The meanest thing someone's ever told me was like, it's never been good enough. And that's always stuck with me because like, it just always sticks in the back of my head, especially like when I'm trying to better myself, like when I'm focusing too much on my insecurities. It's just like something that weighs deep down on me, and like, even to this day, I'm still thinking about it, like over the past couple of years. So, but in a sense, I guess that's also like one of the most helpful things that's been told to me as well, because it's always like pushing me to like push myself further. And honestly, I wouldn't be here today without those words that they said to me. And just like pretty much, I think like, I feel like all words in a way have some sort of deep-rooted effect on someone, even if it's just like a small passing by, like from a stranger, like a compliment. And even like those little compliments like I get on the daily, like oh, nice shirt you have, it always sticks to me, and it's always something that's been in the back of my mind. So I try my best to compliment someone every single day, and honestly it helps me feel better about myself too. That's pretty much it. Thank you.